everyone, and welcome to React Live, and welcome to my talk. And this is going to be fun. We're going to talk about UseEffects. And if you've used React, you have probably gotten kind of frustrated with UseEffects, unless I'm the only one, but I don't think I am. So we're going to go through this. So to start with, I always like to start with a story that's related to what I'm going to talk about. So in this case, this is about HACKTOBERFEST. Last year, the front end of Code Sandbox is an open source project, and that needs to be said before. So last year we tried to go about HACKTOBERFEST as in we created a gigantic issue, and we were like, anyone who wants to get these files and put them as hooks, so use effect and use state and everything instead of classes that we were using, please do it. That would be great, and free t-shirts and blah, blah, blah. And so we thought that would be okay to review, because we were like, okay, it's just changing this dot set state to use state. Sounds easy. It was terrible because we did not know how UseEffects worked. And we ended up like having to close pull requests because we were like, this doesn't work and we don't know why. This is like drove me to research a lot about UseEffects. And today I'm going to share with you like kind of the weird things that I found about UseEffects and the stuff that I think it's important to know. Also, all of our things are now in hooks, so that's good. We figured it out. It just took like 5 months. So today's talk is called The Psychological Effects of UseEffects, because I thought that was funny. So my name is Sarah. I'm a developer at Code Sandbox. If you've never used this, we're basically an over-engineered version of CodePen that allows to use React, Vue, whatever, and even Node if you want to run a server. And I'm also Nikita FTW at Twitter. It has 2 Ks because the first one was taken by the TV show, a fandom from the TV show. We're going to talk about React. And React is JavaScript. That stands for job security. And that's important. I don't know how this only has 79 likes, to be honest. It's just very sad. It's such a good joke. Are you hooked yet? Okay, cool. So let's talk about something. Do you remember component lifecycles? There were things like, there was a bunch more, but they all had the unsafe thing before them. So we're going to talk about, there was component did mount, component update, component did update, component will mount. So there were a lot of component lifecycles, but the reality of component lifecycles is, can you guess when component did update ran? It ran when the component updated. I mean, it's in the goddamn name, like component did update, it run, when the component updates. Can you guess when UseEffect runs? You can't, because it runs in everything. So the idea is that UseEffect, this one function, is supposed to replace everything that you used to have, which sounds like an amazing idea. And I mean, it is, but it takes a while to get used to this function because it does everything. Yeah. So what is UseEffect? If you've never used it, or you just need some refreshing, or you just want to hear me make stupid jokes about it. So here's a UseEffect, and it returns a function. And here you do your magic. You need to return it with curly brackets because we'll get into that in the future. Actually, the future was the next slide, because the return is your cleanup magic. So basically what it means is that in here you run something, let's say you say window.addEventListener, and you need to return a function if you want that effect to be cleaned, which means that this will be window.removeEventListener. And then you have the dependencies array, which is this thing here. And we'll get into the dependencies array, but basically this means like when one of the values in this array changes, rerun this like magic. Yeah. So we have 3 things to play with that will basically make every single hook every single component lifecycle that ever existed. Okay, so I'm gonna start with this sandbox. And so what I have here, it doesn't really matter what I have in the return. I'm actually going to close it, but I'm just going to show it. So I have this toggle that toggles this fancy text. That's just something called React Spectrum that shows it pretty instead of like, this is lorem ipsum. And I have a counter because every React example or every example in the world needs a counter, and I didn't want to stray away from that. So as you can see, just this. So if show text, then run this. And the counter says set the number of times clicked plus 1, and it shows the number of times clicked. Cool, we can close this just to make it easier to understand. And the index.js simply shows home. That's it. And we'll get into this part. Okay, so let's create our first UseEffect. Okay, so how do you use UseEffect to run when anything changes? So this means when the show text changes and when times click changes. I think that's the easiest one because you never want to do it, basically. So you're gonna say UseEffect, and in here you're gonna run this and this, and that's the thing. There is no dependency array. So the dependency array is technically optional, but not really, because like you usually never want to leave it out. So console.log, and I'm gonna say yes. And yeah, so that's cool. That's cool. All good. Yeah. But one thing that's kind of weird, and that we'll get into more later, is if you can see, it also runs on start. So it doesn't just run when something changes. I mean, yes, so it runs when any value inside of it changes and when it mounts, because when it mounts, everything changed. It came from nothing to, you know, being an actual component. It's like a child. He was birthed into this world. Okay, so let's say you only want to run this on start, and it's like, I am a new component. Why are the wave? There we go. I am a new component. So we want to run this on start, which is this, but we don't want to run this on anything else. So let me reload this thing here. And let's say on start means an empty array. Okay, so let's go over what was the difference between what I did and what I did before and what I did now. So right now I added a dependency array, but it's empty. And when I first saw that there was an empty dependency array, I kind of saw it as kind of a hack. So it was basically like, so you have a dependency array, and whenever anything inside of it changes, your component re-renders. So if your array is empty, then nothing changes. And I was like, I guess that makes sense. But let's think about it in another way. The main thing that you need to think about is not, I put an empty array, is I put an array which the elements in it never change. So let's try something. Let me add a text in here. So let me say, hello. This is a text. So this is a string because it never changes. Exactly. So that's the thing. So if I say increase the counter or whatever, this will never change. So if you want to do comments here, like you can also do that. You can say like, this renders a thing. I don't know why I'm doing all of this in like uppercase. But yeah, so this was the first thing that was like, oh, okay, this makes sense. It's not because it's empty. It's because whatever is inside of it never changes. Magic. So if I had a const a here and this const is equal to 32, I don't know why 32, and I just put a in here, the same thing happens because a never changes. So that's what you need to think about. It's not like I'll just put an empty array. What you need to tie it. Yes, English. You need to tie it to the fact that this reruns when whatever is inside of it changes. And that's the most important thing, because I'm gonna try and explain a bit of what happens when this does. So let me do this on show text. So at first it renders I'm a new component because, like I said, it mounts and then it says I'm a new component. Okay, cool. But then if I change the text, it runs again, because the way that React works is that when this changes, when a use state changes, like a state changes, it basically goes all the way to the top and says, okay, I need to run this entire function again. So if I put show text here, instead of I'm a new component, it's going to render true and false, because what it basically does is that nothing of this is magic. I mean, everything is magic. But what I mean is that it actually re-renders the entire function, passes it a new value. So it says show text equals true to that function, and then console.logs it. It just says, when this changes, rerun the function. A re-render is literally a rerun of your function. So that's what's up. Okay, so I have this. Let's run it. This is for the fancy text, but let's run it when the counter changes. Mostly because that's what I need for the example. Okay, so toggle the fancy text, nothing happens, and the counter changes, and we have fancy things. We have a console.log. That's so cool, I know, right? But let's say a lot of the times what you want to do is you don't want to render it on start, because if you wanted to render it on start, you would do this. You want to render when this changes, but not on start. So let's do something really hacky, right? Because like I said, it runs on start because the entire component is birthed into this world. It has to live with Corona. Times clicked is different than 0. One day I'll get, there we go, beautiful, 10 out of 10. And now I put this in here, and let me reload this, and now it works. I mean, it does, but let's try and do the same thing but for the show text. So let me change this for show text. Let me change this for show text. And now I'm looking at this and I'm like, I can't check if it's true or false because it's a Boolean. It's going to keep changing, right? Right? Yes. So that doesn't make sense anymore. So that's the problem with doing things like this. So there are other hacks you can do. And what I'm going to use is useRef. So one of the most more used things for useRef is that I can say ref, and I'm going to create I'm going to call it isMounted just so that I don't have to change it later. And I'm going to create a ref here. Const isMounted equals useRef. Now reduce. And now if I try to console log, so if I say console.log, sorry, I need to wrap this in a UseEffect actually. And let me just say, so every time isMounted changes, console.log it to me. Thank you so much. And there you go. So you get a button. So this is what it usually is. And that's why you can do things like click. Is this a thing? Oh, sorry, I need to add current. Current.click. I don't think this worked. That current.click is my, maybe. I don't know, honestly, at this point. Oh, no, it did. It did, because it's supposed to start on true. And now it started on false and it closed it, which is pretty stupid, but you can do that. But what this means is that, not in this exact case, but I can change other things. So like ittr.ittr or that add class or whatever. I can change things in this isMounted.current. And the thing is, like I said, when you change a state, it re-renders the component. When you change a ref, it just changes the ref because it's a completely mutable value. So we can use this in our favor. So what I'm going to do is say if isMounted.current, I want to run times clicked, right? Does this make sense? Yes. No, I want to run show text. Sorry, this is the same thing. Doesn't really matter. And isMounted, and it runs true. So if isMounted.current, and this needs to start with false. And reload the page here. And isMounted, if isMounted.current, let me console.log this so that we can see what's happening. Console. Oh, wait, sorry. No, actually, this was on me because it's still here, so it mounted. I was like, what the hell is happening? Okay, there we go. It doesn't run it. Okay, I'm not stupid. Okay, cool. I mean, in this exact case, there's plenty of cases where I am. So it still doesn't run and nothing makes it run. Because what we need to do is say, okay, cool. So when you start, the first thing that you might think of is running isMounted.current equals true. And you're gonna be like, wait, but this runs on start. That's because we're still thinking about the way we used to run, the way we run state is because you say isMounted and then it reruns the function. But in this case, it does not. So you need to put this after. And if I reload this, it actually doesn't console.log it and only does when I click it. So this is a very good way to get around these kinds of things. And yeah, so you may have heard about the part where you go about unmounting a component. So, and one thing that you may do is that, let's say on unmount, let me delete all of this, and I just want to return. So I want to return, and I want to say on return, give me this function, and say console.log, no more component, bye-bye. Cool. And you're like, okay, this is going to run when the component unmounts. And that's another issue that I've had, is that it actually does not run when the component unmounts. This runs when this effect unmounts. So basically, every time this effect has done its job, for that time, it was going to run the component. So on unmount, it would only run if you do this. So let me do this, and let me comment this line. And now let me remove this. And this says on unmount of this component, sorry, the consoles are kind of delayed, and it makes me think that I didn't do it properly. On unmount of this component, because this is only going to run on start. So the only way that this effect is going to finish running is when the component completely unmounts. So when I go to index, I have a bunch of stuff here that I already prepared for this to be able to test this. So, and if I toggle the home, now it actually unmounts. And there's a couple of other things that I want to show you about unmount. Okay, one thing that I found out the hardest way is that I was doing something. Let's say I was checking a bunch of ifs here. Sorry, add line comment. That was not helpful at all. But this was, so that's nice. So let's do something here. And what I want to do is that I want to say like if, what I'm going to do is like usually how you do things in a function. So if, I don't know, set show text equals true. I mean, it just has to be set show text. You don't have the true. Then in here, you can return like, I don't know, 1. And then you can say return null. Okay. And you get this, which like you also get an error, obviously, but usually you don't have your console like this. So one thing that is very important when you do UseEffect is never return null. I know that you're like, why would I ever return null? And I'm like, because I usually run functions that return null. Like, that's just what I do. And it's going to give you an error called destroy is not a function, which is a very peculiar error, but that's because this function, I think in their inner cores, is called destroy. And in this case, destroy is not a function because it's literally null. But now you want to see something cool? If I do this, it still says destroy is not a function. Never mind. But if you do this, then it's fine. Not this. This is going to give you a syntax error. But if you do this, and I reload this, and I toggle the text, it still says destroy is not a function. So there is a thing that you mustn't forget about this. It's that, and now like entire code sandbox went bananas. Oh, wait, because I'm still returning 1 here. That's the thing. So in this case, if I do this, if I delete this, and I just say return null, and I reload the page, now it works. Exactly. But if I do return null, and destroy is not a function, exactly. But now if I say undefined, and I do this, everything works. Because undefined is a function, and that's what we've learned from this entire talk, is that null is not a function, but undefined is. So all the times that you've seen undefined is not a function were all lies. That's all I'm saying. Okay, so now let's do something weird. Okay, so let's take this to the extreme. I'm going to create a UseEffect. And I want to do something. I want to say when show text changes, sorry about that. Show text changes. What I want to do is that I want to say, I want to toggle, I want to add to this. Okay, cool. So set number of times clicked equals, I'm going to get the times clicked already in the state, and I'm going to say times click plus 1. Oh, times click, no. TypeScript is the best. Wait, you're not being useful, TypeScript. There we go. So this means that if I reload this and I toggle the fancy text, it means that if I toggle the fancy text, it also toggles this. All good, makes sense, right? Now let's do something really stupid. Now let's do something really like, okay, so let's return a function. We're all good. What we can do is that we should do this on show text. So we can return a function that sets show text to s and not s. So this function will run forever. So if I toggle the fancy text, it runs forever. Because what I'm doing, and let's try to understand why this is happening. Like, because this is not a bug in any way. This makes perfect sense. I mean, kinda, but okay. So what I'm doing here is that I say, okay, so if the show text changes, so if I click this, let me reload it again so I don't break code sandbox. When the show text changes, or in the start, run set number of times clicked plus 1. But when you want mount, actually change the text back. So what does that do? If you want mount and you say set show text equals to whatever it isn't, what happens is React is like, oh, okay, so you changed the state, so you want me to rerun this entire component. And he reruns the entire component and runs the same thing again, because it basically goes here and does the exact same thing. And he reruns it and reruns it and reruns it, because this runs on start. Does that make sense? So if you change this, set show text, let me restart this, otherwise, you know. So you start this function, you start this component and set show text, and you say, okay, when show text changes, what you're gonna do is run this and then run set show text again. But what happens is show text keeps changing in here. So it's gonna rerun it again, and since it has changed again, it's gonna run this function again. The reason it doesn't do it at the start is because this return only happens on component unmount in the general component. So that can also happen if I do this, but it doesn't have a lot of, gain because it's not actually showing the component anymore. I think this can actually kind of explain what is important about, like, generally about UseEffects and this kinds of stuff, is that any state reruns the entire component. So that's why if you do use ref, you have to put it afterwards, but if you use state, you have to put it before, because it reruns the entire component. And that's, I think, the main thing that you should get from this talk. And another thing is that the point of these things, and the more you use them, the more you will get stuff like, so in this case, I don't want to run this again when times clicked has changed. So for example, exactly, so now it does this. So this is not going to be able to stop. Give me a second. Okay, there we go. Yes, it is not defined. That's what I want. So, but let me just remove this, and I just use times click like this, and I remove this, it's going to tell you, it's going to give you an error, and it's going to say, if you only need times click, okay, as a missing dependency. And I would say, if you get this error, think, do I really want to run the entire component when this dependency changes? Do I really want to add this effect? Do I want to add it to the effect? And that's the way that like my mind took a long time to change, is that I just said this, and I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Let me add this here. And then everything broke, and I was like, what is happening? So that's the thing. It depends a lot on what you actually want to do. Okay, yeah. Because in this example, I don't care if times click changed. I only care if show text changed. And that's what you need to keep track of. You don't care about that. You want to keep track of show text. And so that's what you put in there. What I want you to get out of is this dependency array is not magic. You just need to really think about what is the order in which your things run, and what do you actually want to keep track of in terms of changes. Because what the React Hooks ESLint plugin does is try to say, these are all the dependencies you're using. Do you want to keep track of all of them? And sometimes you don't, and that's fine. The more you use UseEffects, honestly, I think it has happened to a lot of us, is the less you start, you still read this, but a lot of the times you're like, wait, no, this is actually not what I want. Thank you so much, which is fine. It's there to help you, but it's not there to mandatory you, to like obligate you to put everything, because sometimes that's not what you want. Yeah, okay. So I hope this has helped you make some more sense of UseEffects. And yeah, I hope this helps you make a lot more sense of UseEffects, and it helps you see it through the different eyes of, this is not a component, this is not a lifecycle method. This is everything. I want to run this in this exact moment, but it needs to change your mentality to, I want to run when the component updates, to I want to run when this prop updates. So it's way more granular, and that's something that you need to shift your mind to. Yeah, so that's it. If you like the way that I try to explain things, I wrote a book about React. It's called The Opinionated Guide to React, and yeah, you can get it at The Opinionated Guide to React, not just Opinionated Guide to React. And yeah, that's about it. I'm really terrible at marketing, so this is being really awkward, and I'm actually just doing it to a screen. I don't think I could ever do it live and be like, I wrote a book. I would just be like, there's a book. Yeah, thank you so much, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your talks that you have today, and have an amazing day. Bye. Cheers.